Hey guys, this is your Digital Super Saiyan 3 back here with another video, and finally, I'm free to do my September pay-per-view review. And what better pay-per-view for the month of September than WWF Breakdown 1998? Took place September 27th, 1998 in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada at the Corpse Coliseum. On commentary for this show, we have Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler. So our opening matchup, we have Owen Hart defeating Edge in a great match to start off the show. This was an awesome match. You have Owen Hart taking on Edge, and Edge debuted back in August, made his in-ring debut back in August, even though he first appeared in July, near the end of July, on television, but he had mostly just been in the crowds and stuff. Now he's competing in the ring, and this is his first singles match on a pay-per-view, and he's taking on Owen Hart. And this was a great match between the veteran of Owen Hart and the young rookie of Edge. Edge showing his skills. This was a really well-worked match. And this was also the first WWF pay-per-view where we saw Christian, and Owen Hart rolled up Edge for the victory. 1, 2, 3. Owen Hart is your victor. Next up, we get a tag team match as Al Snow and Scorpio defeat Too Much, Brian Christopher and Scott Taylor, which is the future Scotty 2 Hotty and Grandmaster Sexay, who would later form Too Cool back in the year 2000. So, or shall I say 99, 2000. This match was alright, I guess. Al Snow and Scorpio got the victory, and yes, I know Al Snow and Scorpio, they would go on to form the Job Squad with Bob Holly, but, you know, it is what it is. I mean, Al Snow hit everyone with head, even hitting his own partner, and he still hit the snowplow to get his team the victory. So yeah, Al Snow and Scorpio win the match. Our next match on the show is a match between Droz and Marvelous Mark Marrow, or just Mark Marrow, or Marvelous Mark Marrow. Anyway, Marvelous Mark Marrow had Jacqueline with him, as, you know, in his corner, and yes, she was the women's champion, and they were taking on Droz. This, I think, was Droz's only one-on-one match on a pay-per-view. I mean, most of the time when we think of Droz, he had been teaming with the Legion of Doom, and yes, Droz's career would end a year later in 1999 on an episode of SmackDown when he would have a match with D'Lo Brown. And yes, this would lead to Droz's tragic accident, which would be the end of his in-ring career. Yeah, I mean, I feel sorry for the guy that his in-ring career ended so shortly, and he could have had a promising career he could have had a promising in-ring career, but, you know, a tragic twist of fate was just horrible. So, our next match is an Anything Goes match, as Bradshaw defeats Vader in an Anything Goes match. And yes, this, I believe, was Vader's last one-on-one matchup in the WWF on a pay-per-view. And yes, his run in the WWE/WWF was not as successful as his run in WCW. And yes, I know, it could also be involved with the backstage politics. That was also the reason why Vader's run in the WWE wasn't as successful than his run in WCW was. And yes, I know after his run in the WWE ended, he later would go on to, he returned to Japan and wrestled there. So there's that Vader had going for him. So yeah, this match wasn't really all that great. I mean, yes, Bradshaw won, but still, it wasn't a good match. Alright. So, next we get a cage match for the number 1 contendership for the WWF Championship as The Rock defeats Ken Shamrock and Mankind in a great match. And yes, this was a number 1 contenders match inside a cage. It's a triple threat steel cage match that was just so awesome to watch from start to finish. As Rock, Shamrock, and Mankind all got their shots and licks in on each other, especially Foley here, having his flashback to Madison Square Garden where he saw Don Morocco and Jimmy Snuka, and Jimmy Snuka dived off the top of the steel cage. And yeah, Mankind tried to hit a diving elbow off the top of the cage onto the Rock's prone body. Rock moved out of the way. Mankind still crashed and burned. There was a steel chair used in this match. We saw a steel chair even be used in this match. It was just insane. And Rock got the pinfall on Ken Shamrock right as Mankind was trying to escape the cage. And right before Mankind's feet hit the cage, Rock won the cage match, this triple threat cage match. It was definitely the match of the night. And it was a great match. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about Breakdown, as well as its main event, which I'm getting to soon. Our next match features Goldust, or shall I say Dustin Runnels, taking on Val Venis. And this was over a storyline where Val Venis was effing Terry Runnels, where he said that I'm gonna F your wife. Right to Dustin Rhodes' face. And Dustin Rhodes, aka Goldust, the late 90s were not kind to him. I mean, yes, he went under so many damn gimmick changes, it's ridiculous. He was Goldust, the artist formerly known as Goldust, the preacher Dustin Runnels, back to Goldust again, and then he became 7 in WCW, which he just wrestled as himself when he returned to WCW. So there was that. And yes, it was not very kind to Goldust. Anyway, the crowd was more or less behind Val Venis because, it's the Attitude Era. It's 1998. Raunchy gimmicks were the thing. And, they were booing Dustin Runnels and his whole preacher gimmick, or Dustin Rhodes and his preacher gimmick that he was doing, that he's a preacher. Anyway, yeah, Val Venis got the victory, and he walked away with not only the victory, but also with Terry. Yes, Terry was in Val Venis' freaking corner. So there's that. So now we get to our next match, which is a 6-man tag match as Billy Gunn, the Road Dogg, and X-Pac of D-Generation X defeat Jeff Jarrett and Southern Justice in a 6-man tag match. And yes, this is continuing from SummerSlam after Jeff Jarrett lost to X-Pac in a hair versus hair match. Yes, this is continuing from the feud that Jeff Jarrett and X-Pac were having. and X-Pac beat him in a hair versus hair match. So, yeah, the 6-man tag match was a good match, but it was just enjoyable to a certain degree. Like, DX got the victory. And yes, even though Triple H and Chyna were on the poster for Breakdown, they didn't technically appear at the event. Yes, Triple H and Chyna did not appear for the event because Triple H got injured, I think. And yes, I think he would return in December, so there's that. So now we get to the meat and potatoes, the main event for the WWF Championship, as Stone Cold Steve Austin in a triple threat match defends the World Wrestling Federation Championship against both The Undertaker and Kane. Basically, this was like a bona fide handicap match. Basically, Kane and The Undertaker were not allowed to pin one another because these were restrictions that Mr. McMahon, or Vince McMahon, placed on The Undertaker and Kane, that neither one of them were allowed to pin one another. Even though in a triple threat match, the first person to gain a pinfall wins. However, Undertaker and Kane were not allowed to pin one another because of Vince McMahon. Because Vince said you are prohibited from beating each other. So because they were prohibited from beating each other and freaking pinning each other, they were only allowed to pin Austin, where Austin can pin either one of them to retain his title. This was a very chaotic triple threat match. Hell, Kane and Undertaker even got some exchanges with each other. But ultimately, finally, we saw Undertaker and Kane chokeslam Austin, and both pinning Austin at the same time for the 1, 2, 3. However, this led to the World Wrestling Federation title being vacated until the Survivor Series of 1998. Yes, for 2 months, the World Wrestling Federation's top title would be vacated up until the Survivor Series, would a new champion be crowned during a one-night tournament. So, yeah. After Austin is pinned and loses the title, Vince McMahon's cronies and Vince McMahon himself have possession of the Smoking Skull belt. And Vince is like, you don't have it anymore! It's mine! And he's, and as Austin is confronting Vince, Vince flips off Austin and gets in his limousine and then drives the hell off. And that is Breakdown 1998. Final thoughts? Well, after a great pay-per-view like SummerSlam, this was just an okay show, with a really good cage match between Ken Shamrock and Mankind being one of my favorite matches of the show. And definitely, yeah, Breakdown 98 was a great show. Though Judgment Day was pretty lackluster. Yeah, the Judgment Day pay-per-view in October was really lackluster. So yeah, this has been your Digital Super Saiyan 3, and I'll see you next time for my October show.